So I'd like to introduce our speakers today. We have Dr. Elora Gupta and Dr. Courtney Williamson. Elora has been a global regulatory strategy lead for drug and device products almost 2 decades during her tenure at Bristol Myers Squibb and at Otsuka. She has been a Swartz advisor since 2016 and has rapidly gained understanding of translating industry learning to the academic research and startup community. Her focus is to assist medical product developers appreciate the regulatory framework that informs development of a target product profile, as well as offer opportunities for expedited development and marketing authorization of a well-differentiated product. Elora has a PhD in pharmaceutical science from Ohio State University with a postdoctoral fellowship at the University of Chicago, Pfizer School of Medicine. And Courtney is the CEO and founder of AbiliLife, engineering, a company developing products to improve the quality of life for Parkinson's disease patients. She invented the Calibrace Plus back brace, which is a brace specifically designed for Parkinson's patients to improve posture and balance while maintaining an active and healthy lifestyle. So Courtney and Elora, I'll hand it over to you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for having us. Before we start, can everyone raise their hands if this applies to you? If you have a medical device company or you are planning to develop a medical device company. And I think you just go to like the reactions, click on the reactions button and just raise your hand. Not like your physical hand, because I need to see like let's see. Does everyone know what I'm talking about? Okay, so we have Martina. So you all sign on what is this, a Wednesday to talk about medical regulation, and you don't have a medical device company, you're not starting one, you're not a part of one. Is that correct? I'm not going to move on until I get any response, because I'm not just talking to myself and Elora. So if someone unmute, let me know what your intentions are for being here today. Or we'll just sit. Okay.
At least for me, I have a class that encourages us to attend Connects and just kind of learn more about entrepreneurship. So that's personally why I'm here right now.
Okay.
I would also second that, just learning, different industries and how people have gone into them and just kind of the ins and outs of their experiences.
Okay. So
for me, I don't have a medical device myself. However, I mentor and collaborate with startups, and they sometimes have these kind of needs because they are healthcare startups. And there's one particular company in Latin America that is hoping to expand worldwide and to the USA as well. And basically what they told me is that when you are seeking for medical approvals for devices, it's very beneficial for such companies to get FDA approval first, because it's a staple worldwide. And once FDA approves your device, then it's much more easier for you to be accepted not only in the US, but in all other countries. And I know there is some kind of competing credential in Europe that I'm not that close familiar with.
right.
But I'm looking forward to hearing more about the process, because I also know that the process can be pretty lengthy and difficult to get. At the same time, during the COVID, there are some kind of exceptions that were pre-approved for a group of devices. And if your device falls into this group, you are already FDA approved. So I'm looking forward to hearing more about all of these categories.
Okay, great. So that's helpful, just to understand the audience. Okay, so, and then, is this how you pronounce your name? Arjun? Am I pronouncing that correctly? Okay, great. So you make 3D prosthetics for people in need, and you're currently printing. Oh, awesome. Okay, I'm gonna keep that in mind. So let's, Elora, if you want, I'm gonna share my screen with everyone, because we have a slideshow that we wanna present. Can everybody see that?
Yes.
Okay. All right, it's loading. Okay, great. So thanks, Allison, and for introducing us. So we want to talk to you today about leveraging partnerships with the FDA during and after COVID, and just some general advice for startups. As we all know and are just painfully aware, COVID has impacted a lot of things. And, you know, the FDA and medical devices, and of course, vaccines, et cetera, being a lot of those sort of systems that have been disrupted. But I'm glad to hear that we have a wide variety of people on the call who are either interested in medical devices or wanting to learn more about the market. This just gives you a good opportunity. I think there's nothing like understanding what a market or what a segment is made of unless you see it in action during a crisis. So this is a great time if you want to look for the silver lining to sort of see how Medicare and the FDA interact. So let me just get my bearings here. Okay, so maybe we could just start off a little bit with how we became involved with regulatory and reimbursement. Essentially, it was out of necessity. So, Elora, do you want to sort of kick us off and tell us a little bit about how you got involved in FDA and regulatory and reimbursement?
Yeah, sure. Hello, everyone. And so after spending about 2 decades in drug and device industry, and I really wanted to explore the entrepreneurial world. And since my children were students, and that time my daughter was a student at CMU, and I learned about a very thriving entrepreneurial community within CMU, to me, it seemed like a very natural transition. And so what I did was really leverage my industry understanding, and especially in the industry, I worked specifically on the regulatory strategy side. So for almost 15 of the 20 years, I worked closely with FDA as well as health authorities outside the FDA. So a lot with Europe or Canada, Australia, Latin America, Asian countries. I mean, a truly global footprint. And so from that, I would say the most valuable lessons you can always learn is if you have taken your drug through that pathway, through an FDA review, that there's a lot you can learn, as you will see from our presentations or looking at, you know, sitting at webinars or workshops or looking at FDA guidances, but you have to personally experiences. And to me, the two big experiences that I draw on was first working on an anticoagulant called Eliquis. When I was at Bristol Myers Squibb, we developed in collaboration with Pfizer. And that drug I started with from like benchtop, from doing the IND, which is for first in human trials, to NDA, which is marketing approval. But with Pfizer, we marketed in over 100 countries. So it was a massive program. Eliquis right now has about 10 billion in annual sales, but that journey was very insightful. And then at Otska, I work with on this product called AbiliLife MySide, which is a little like a chip within a tablet. And that gives you, once you take the tablet, it gives you a lot of information about internal kind of vital signs monitoring. And so that was a device, a very novel device and a combination product. And so based on that, and over the past, since 2016, I've worked with a wide range of startups. And so including with Courtney. And so that's how, you know, it's been a continuous learning journey for me to translate from like big industry to small startups. Courtney?
So then mine was just, this sort of came out of a personal need. So my mom had Parkinson's disease, and I was a doctoral student at the type of school business at Carnegie Mellon. And my whole focus was to become a research professor and to teach And that didn't happen because my mom had tremendous difficulty with her posture and balance. And so I tried to find a solution to help her, and I couldn't find it. So I thought, well, maybe I can just make one. And then 6 years later, I'm running my company because I realized that the product that I needed didn't exist, and that there were 1.5 million Parkinson's patients in America, and 70 to 90% of them had postural instability, which caused increased fall risk, difficulty with breathing, digestion. It was just difficult for their quality of life. So I founded my company in 2014 with the help of the Schwartz Center and also Project Olympus. So I really wanted to create a novel technology. And I want to say that I think Carnegie Mellon was a great place and one of the best places for me to do that, because of all the connections and all of the opportunities that exist and the interdisciplinary sort of mindset that CMU has. So I was working with biomedical engineering students while I was getting my PhD at the Tepper School of Business. And so that's just something that you really don't see a lot in other universities that maybe aren't as strong in a lot of things. I think CMU is very strong in engineering and the arts and business and social sciences. And so we're very fortunate to sort of be on the campus. So that's my story. And the interesting thing was Elora's daughter and I met, I think it was at Alpha Lab Gear. So if anybody knows, it's the local hardware accelerator that's actually a nationally ranked accelerator. And she was just really interested in what I was doing. And she now has a wonderful career on the West Coast working with medical devices and implantable devices. And but she was very interested in what we were doing. So she started interning with us. And then she said, I think you really need to meet my mom. And I said, at first I thought like, oh no, is this a helicopter parent that's like constantly being obsessed with like their college daughter's work? And it was absolutely not. Laura was like, I'm actually an expert in this. And so we were able to build a great relationship over these years. And so, but I think the thing was that we realized that we both had a passion for innovation while staying within the regulatory guidelines. So the one thing that you'll hear over and over again in this presentation is like, do not avoid the FDA and Medicare. I think we see way too many startups that just think that they don't have to be regulated, or like there's some sort of shortcut, or like they're afraid of regulation and so they don't want to engage with it, which makes things even worse. So we're going to talk more about that. But we both have an understanding and met at that intersection that we do think that innovation is important. And in fact, Medicare and CMS, they both think that innovation is important, but you have to go about it in a certain way. So we're hoping to sort of touch on those points today. So yeah, our thought process over the years has evolved, right, Elora? Like we started out thinking, like you go to the FDA first, and then you figure out how your product gets paid for. But over these years, and with my own experience with my back brace, I have learned that you really have to do them in like a parallel process. So it's much better to manage this in a way that you're putting regulatory and reimbursement in the same sort of process. So we're going to work on a really great flow chart that we've made later on in the presentation to show you what we mean by that. Then having understanding of the startup world, so navigating it in the least burdensome manner. So with startups, we're always strapped for cash and time. So it's understandable that you can't take one full-time person and have them spend a year working on your strategy, because you just don't have the time, you don't have the resources. So understanding how you're going to build your product, and along the way build a regulatory and reimbursement strategy so that you're not having to kind of do it separately and waste time and energy. And understanding from the beginning that if you're going to go into the medical device space, there is going to be some sort of regulation, and you're going to need to have the device paid for. And unless it's something like a $10 device that you're making for like $1 or pennies, right? Like it's probably going to be an expensive product. So who's going to pay for that? And in America, we we typically have the notion that, okay, my insurance should pay for whatever it is that I have, right? So that means that you do have to, as you're building your product, build in your reimbursement strategy. And then the last bit is you need to start engaging with the agencies like FDA and CMS to align on a development plan to get the right evidence at the right time to get desired claims. So we'll talk a little bit about what claims are and what that means. But basically, if you want to create a device to help with sleep apnea, right? Like, how are you going to get the data to prove, like, yes, this does help with sleep apnea and it helps in this way and it's X% consistent and reliable. So those are the types of things that you cannot avoid. And our thought process has changed dramatically since the beginning, when we thought, okay, maybe we just have to focus on regulatory first and then reimbursement. And we found that there's a lot of synergy between the two. So FDA, CMS, which is Center for Medicare Services, and the FDA and CMS have very clear guidelines and have publicly stated, and these are public statements that we've lifted from their website, about innovation. So FDA says they want open lines of communication between the FDA and industry because they will provide regulatory outcomes that best serve the patient. So a lot of people think, and when they come to us, they think, oh, well, the FDA, they want to shut us down or they don't really want to help. And that's not the case at all. I mean, you have a direct quote saying that they want to have these open lines of communication. It is totally free to talk to the FDA. You don't have to pay anything to do that. They want to talk with you because what their goals are to help patients. And so if there's something that you have that they feel like can help patients, they want to talk with you. CMS is very similar. Again, it says CMS maintains open channels of communication between outside entities and CMS components charged with making coverage, coding, and payment decisions. So again, they want to work outside of themselves to help make sure that there are proper payment schedules in place. So it might seem daunting to think about these really big government organizations, and you might think, oh, they don't want to talk to me, or there's no way. But actually, they're mandated by what's in their regulations to have open communication and dialogue with everyone outside of them that might have something that helps patients. So I know I'm talking about some of these terminologies you might not understand, especially if you've never heard any of us or either of us speak. But that's okay, we have you covered because we've been talking and doing this talk since 2017, and believe that the videos are on YouTube, and the presentation slideware is available through Allison or Sonia. So if you need to go back and look at sort of a refresher of like, what is FDA 101 and the terminology and sort of some of the nitty gritty, we'd suggest that you go and find that information. We don't have time to talk about that today because we want to really get into kind of workshopping some of your ideas that you might have and figuring out the best way to navigate you through FDA and CMS. So, but we wanted to just make you aware that we do have prior slides that you can take a look at. So let's start with this part here. Did anybody see this this Jeopardy episode? I don't remember what year it was, maybe like in 2014 or 2010. I can't remember what year this was, but at any rate, this is Jeopardy. And this little kind of square here is Watson, which was purchased by IBM. So this was a machine learning algorithm, and it won Jeopardy. It won the Jeopardy tournament against humans. So you can see it's two competitors of these human guys, and then you have IBM Watson in the middle, right? So it was so exciting to everyone because it's, oh my gosh, Watson is brilliant, right? Like it can pull this data and answer these questions. It's a very sophisticated form of machine learning. So long story short, IBM purchased Watson, and they had a plan. They were going to take Watson from Jeopardy. They were going to put him in the medical area, and Watson was supposed to figure out how to cure cancer and work alongside doctors and oncologists to help cure cancer. Well, I think it was this past week, I was looking at the news and found out that IBM is now divesting Watson because it was a total and utter failure. For those of you who have listened to our presentations before, unfortunately, nearly every year, we always have some sort of regulatory and reimbursement failure to share because they're just huge and epic. The year before we did the Ranos, which I think the court case is still going on, with the fraudulent company that was said to be able to, with like just one little droplet of blood, determine all sorts of blood, tests through blood analysis, which turned out to be completely fraudulent. Well, with IBM Watson, it wasn't fraudulent. They just overestimated how their machine learning and their device could actually work to help develop cures for cancer. So when you think about why are we talking about this now? Reason why is because you can't just like develop a cure for cancer. You can't just like start analyzing data. There is a certain regulation and there are certain protocols in place to make sure that patients are safe and to make sure that data are coming out in an efficacious way. And unfortunately, IBM was not able to figure out how to do that, which is why now they're trying to like quietly divest this failure that they spent several billions of dollars and at least a decade trying to build out. So we just want to remind you, jeopardy does not mean, just because you won in jeopardy does not mean that you can determine someone's medical condition. So let's talk about what the FDA and the CMS do regulate and what it is they do. So the FDA, its mission is to protect and promote U.S. health. That's basically, at bare bones, that's what it does. CMS, its mission is to strengthen and modernize U.S. healthcare system and to provide access to high quality care and improve health at lower costs. So they want really great care at lower costs for our taxpayers. Unfortunately, for most startup founders like us, it often feels like this like really ominous black box, right? Like you're just like, I'm not sure what to do with this exactly, or how to navigate. FDA is so large and CMS is so large and there's so many regulations, and what do I do? So that's what we're hoping this presentation kind of helps touch on, so that it doesn't feel so much like a black box. So, Elora, do you want to touch on this part a little bit? Just
Yeah, so I can go over the next few slides a little bit. And I think this relates to the question that was raised earlier on. So pre-pandemic, FDA had, their existing regulatory framework, and they had all these opportunities, as Courtney said, to engage with the product developers, and especially for medical device startups. Great innovation, but they really need to develop that in the right way for that innovation to ultimately reach the patients, because that's what the FDA cares for, and that's what you care for. You have a shared objective. But then due to the pandemic, they had things that needed to be cleared much more faster because this was such an emergency. And what they did was that they created new pathways. And perhaps one of the pathways that was being referred to is the EUA, the Emergency Use Authorization. That is being used to approve a lot of drugs, devices, including vaccines. And there is an advisory committee, I believe, later this week or early next week for the J&J vaccine. So what the EUA does, and per the regulations, again, FDA is based on regulation, the codes of federal regulations, guidances that says, in this emergency situation, if you don't act fast, you're going to lose hundreds and thousands of lives. So you have to give kind of a conditional authorization. And the conditional authorization is not like, oh, you just submit some paperwork and they stamp it and you're good to go. You still need to provide data. And that data is all about safety, effectiveness, and then quality, which I'll cover in the next slide. But with EUA, there is more of a less of a amount of data you need to provide right now. But after the FDA gives you the EUA, you have to continue to get that data and provide data so that you stay as an EUA. Because after EUA, you're not providing the right amount of data, you'll be removed from the market. And then down the line, once the pandemic is under control, which is probably going to be by the end of the year, you have to convert that to a regular approval cycle. Like, you know, for devices, it could be a PMA or a 510K, whatever, whatnot. So the bottom line is that it is, while there is a pandemic and people are dying, still, the product that you're using to treat has to show that it is safe and it is efficacious, and the safety and effectiveness is determined by FDA standards. In keeping with the FDA, as Courtney said, somebody has to pay for these, right? Who is going to pay for these? And so CMS, alongside, has adopted these COVID policies. Lots of payments, for instance, for telehealth, which was not there before, but now it's desperately needed. So again, the whole thing was they both function side by side so that the ultimate product reaches the patient and somebody is paying for it. Courtney, can you move? Okay. So we talked a little bit about the claim. So your product is all about the claim. And this is nothing surprising if they tell you, okay, so what are you developing? I am developing a product to treat this or to prevent this, or, you know, so it has to be related to some kind of a medical condition. And broadly, if you look at the definition of any medical product, a drug or a device, it has to be either to diagnose, to cure, to mitigate, to treat or prevent, or it can affect a function or structure of your body. If your claim covers any of that, you are a medical product. And so when you develop that claim that you want to make, I am the very best product to treat your, you know, your nasal congestion. I'm just throwing out just a generic thing. It's based on all guidances as FDA is soundly grounded on science. So when you start about looking at your science, your technology, your innovation, how you differentiate it from all these other products in the market, that also helps you with your IP to know exactly what those claims are, that you truly have unique claims. Then you have to put in there, FDA will always look at, so what is the current standard of care? And then what is the unmet need? What does the patient want? The user voice, whether it's the patient, it's the caregiver, it's the healthcare provider, what do they need? Then you have to look at the safety, the effectiveness, and the quality. Those are the three main pillars. Those are really high standards to meet. And then once you've done that, that information is taken with CMS. So CMS overlays their assessment on top of FDA's. So FDA review, and you're kind of already making the case, so you want to make a really strong case so that when CMS looks at it, they make the assessment that it is reasonable, is it necessary, is it value added? And that's how you have a differentiated product, which is clinically meaningful, it's patient-centered, and it is cost-effective. Moving on, next slide. So the bottom line is for you to be able to, you know, work with the FDA and CMS and for them to work with you and give you that feedback, you need evidence. Many people confuse this with any kind of data. Data versus evidence is very big. And the difference is that with evidence, there is that level of rigor, robustness, statistical assessment that gives you, you know, that lowers your chances for false positive or false negative, essentially, broadly. And the FDA and CMS will look for that. So when you're looking for evidence, and especially if it's an innovative device, you get that through non-clinical, and that could be a benchtop, it could be modeling, simulation, it could be animal studies. And then of course, clinical studies always outweigh. That gives you the actual proof. And then when you go to the FDA, they are going to evaluate it from the safety, effectiveness, and quality. And at the end of the day, your benefit of using the device has to outweigh the risk. So you can get great data for safety, great data for effectiveness, but when you put the two together, somehow your risk seems to outweigh the benefit. Well, the drug is a failure or the device is a failure. And same thing for CMS, what you need to do is look for data to cover coding requirements, coverage requirement, and payment. So those are the three main arms for the CMS. But the coding, coverage, and payment, the initial assessment though, starts from what you are preparing from in your FDA package. And wouldn't it be a good idea if you could think prospectively what they might think, and as you're preparing your FDA package, you begin to add in some of your CMS requirements. Moving on. Okay, do you want to take it on from here,
Yeah,
Courtney?
sure. So this is yet another quote from the FDA. And the thing that FDA and CMS have in common, just to sort of tie it all together, is you know, you are the sponsor. So this is ideally sponsors in the FDA work collaboratively, having a shared public health goal of early availability of safe, effective, and high quality products to the American public. So this is a direct quote from the FDA. Website. So they want to work with you. And if you leave with nothing else from this presentation, just remember that the FDA and CMS, they do want to work with you. So it's not an adversarial relationship. Way too often we receive comments from new entrepreneurs or people just getting started, and they say, oh, I don't want to deal with the FDA. My investors said I can't deal with them. They're way too much work. It's going to cost too much money. They're going to shut us down. So just remember that that's totally false and not the case. So,
sorry, may I just add, it's not about just, you voluntarily going and saying, oh, let me work with the FDA and CMS. If you are a medical product, and as I said, is dependent on your claims, and you don't go through the FDA and you say, I'm just going to sell it on Amazon or put it on your website, that is an illegal activity. You are going to, FDA has this whole page where they actively monitor all kinds of sales channels, and whether it's your website or you're going through some convention, or even, wherever way you are selling a medical product that they have not authorized, that's a criminal activity. And there are a series of steps. So there'll be a warning letter. You don't listen, there is going to be cease and desist. You don't listen, they're going to take criminal action. That happened with Theranos. And it's not just the FDA. FDA's sister agency, that's FTC and SEC, work with them. So during COVID, there was this huge proliferation of companies selling all these products to cure COVID or this, that, and the other. None of them went through the FDA, and FDA had on an average, they was closing down several of these companies, shutting them down. And it's not just closing that down. FDA issues these warning letters that are public. They are asked, you also have to pay a fine, and so on and so forth. So, so you have to understand, if your investors say, there's a way you can kind of bypass the FDA, that is, death for your company, because this agency will come after you and shut you down. So you have to remember that part. That's what they call regulatory. That it means also that they regulate from a fraudulent or criminal perspective products that are in the US.
Yep, exactly. That's a good point. It's not an option. The only option is if you decide you don't want to do a food, a drug, or device, or anything that the FDA regulates, and they say, I don't want to do this. I'll pivot into another company that is not regulated. That's your only option that you have. If you are regulated, then that is what it is. One personal story of mine, I am looking at manufacturers overseas. So there's a manufacturer in Mexico that I want to work with, and I actually have to pay to get him signed up to be a registered entity to produce my product. Even though I'm already a registered entity, he has to be as well. I don't want to do that, but I have to if I want to sell my product in the US. So it's just one of those things where it's not an option. There's no way around it. If you're going to do this type of work, then this is what you have to sign up for. But this presentation is trying to help you understand that you do need to sign up for it, but they are willing and able and available to help and to facilitate. So, okay. So now we want to get into this sort of interactive workshop, and Arjun, I need to pick on you as our participant because it looks like on the call, you're the only one who has a medical device that you're actively working on, and you were so kind to send us the link. So if you wouldn't mind, it's not going to be painful, and we're going to walk you through, but we think it's just best to help so that your peers can kind of see how some of these decisions are made. So if you wouldn't mind unmuting yourself, you don't have to show your screen or anything like that. But we'll start. Can you hear me?
Yeah, he says he can't speak since he's in school.
Oh, okay. That's unfortunate. So let's start. Does anyone else have any sort of medical device?
Or drug. Drug is fine too.
Okay, so Martina, can I pick on you? Because it sounds like while you're not developing, oh,
Brian. Right?
Brian. Okay, you can unmute yourself.
Yeah, hi.
Hi, how are you?
Good, how are you?
I'm doing well, thank you. Thanks for participating. Do you want to just briefly talk about your drug and what it is that you do?
Yeah, sure. I guess, Dr. Gupta and I have talked a little bit about this before, working a little bit together. Yeah, I have currently I'm a research associate at Carnegie Mellon University in the Department of Chemistry. And, from technology we've developed in the academic lab, we've spun it out into a startup company, and the technology in a broad sense is a new type of chelation therapy to reduce the inherent toxicity with current chelators, and the chelators are what bind heavy metals and remove those from the body. So we've used molecular design to dramatically improve the safety while maintaining efficacy. So our target, at least initial target market, is to treat low-level lead poisoning. So that right now affects nearly 1 million children in the U.S., but there's not a safe treatment for low-level lead toxicity, even though any lead is toxic, and has been shown that even very low levels, significantly reduce intellectual and developmental function.
Great, awesome. Okay, so this isn't going to be painful, but thank you so much for volunteering. So you can just stay on the line. So we have this one slide here. Elora, do you want to just talk briefly about your industry experience and what it means to sort of calculate probability of success when you're thinking about your regulatory and reimbursement strategy?
Yeah. So this is something that really helps you to focus in on what would be some of those key elements that both the FDA and the CMS is going to look like, and trying to figure out this probability that you are going to be a successful product in the market, like Eliquis, and make $10 billion in annual sale. But it takes it's a long journey, and then even with the most best designed products, that you may not ultimately be successful. And so when we looked at the ways that, as I mentioned, that I've been looking at ways to translate what we did at the industry, and sometimes it seems so cumbersome, but now coming here, I'm beginning to appreciate the value of what we had to do. So even at the earlier stages, as you're taking a drug through the development cycle and you're getting new data, it's good to understand what that probability would be. And what we've come up with is this, maybe Courtney at the next slide, to show, it's a little busy, and I think Courtney can help you kind of shepherd you through this, but what we're saying is kind of to come up with what is the probability that your drug, your development process will be successful, and then if that is successful, what is the probability of regulatory and reimbursement success? Because all of these are giant things, but you have to kind of somehow get your arms around it. And so what we came up with is try to boil it down to like one flow, for at least as a starting point, to begin to evaluate that, and then you can kind of flesh this out and blow this out as much as you want, and that helps you to prepare also with the FDA and the CMS. So that's
Okay.
what it is.
Perfect. So Brian, we're going to start and we're going to walk us through, because it's so much easier for me at least to look through this flow chart with an actual example. So you did a really great job, I think, of answering number one, but let's just do it again. The indication for use. So indication for use, basically for everyone on the call, means like, what is your drug or device going to be used for? And I think, Brian, you gave a really great one-line sentence. If you can tell us what the ultimate usage is going to be for your drug.
This would be, I guess, treatment of low-level lead poisoning.
Great.
And there would be like, I mean, even in details, like there's like blood lead level between pushing the limit down to 5 microgram per deciliter, and then currently it's chelations, indicated for 45 and up, but we could also replace that. But we even have there's an actual quantified, value.
So, and then is there any particular age group that you have in mind or disease state that you have in mind?
Yeah, I mean, typically this would be children, because they're the most vulnerable, I guess, for a number of reasons, but yeah, probably young children.
Okay. So, Elora, can you remind me, children with FDA standard, that's 21 and under, right?
For device, 21 and under. Okay. For drugs, 18 and under. Very interesting. So I think for Brian, I think you are looking at the 18 and under group, right? So you're definitely pediatric, which is, again, while not captured here, and as we've discussed previously, this is one area. If you're doing pediatric, which is, again, a really high unmet need area, you get even additional FDA initiatives that you can participate on. That is a great thing. So what Courtney is doing is how sequential you can think about it. It fills that first box, but then you're trying to look at the patient population. So, okay, pediatric.
Okay.
Next, so you are it says a medical device. I think we should have put it as a medical product.
Yeah, so now the next thing is this. Okay, Brian, does your drug diagnose, cure, mitigate, treat, prevent, or impact the body structure / function?
Yes.
Okay, out of those, which one does it do?
I mean, I guess we'd say treat.
Okay.
Right, I guess. I mean, I don't know without being an expert, but.
Yeah, that's a good starting point. Right, fine. So let's say you're treating lead poisoning, low levels of lead poisoning.
In pediatric population. Great. Okay, now, I know it says here is your product a medical device, but let's say, is it a medical device, a medical product, a drug? So is the answer yes? If the answer is yes, then we're going to do two things. If the answer is no, then congratulations. I guess, you don't have to go through this flow chart, but we know that it is. So we're going to answer yes. So now let's go down to 2B. Mm-hmm. Is there an existing payment code? If so, for what amount? Do you know if there are any existing drugs on the market, and if so, what do they sell for?
Yes. So that's why I kind of say the low level. So there is a drug for high level lead poisoning. So there should be a code for that. And I guess, I don't know, I've seen where a course of treatment costs around $2,000.
And how many courses of treatment do you need to be completely treated?
Well, I guess that would be one total course. So it'd be multiple, like a regimen that, is a multi-week, I guess, regimen. So multiple pills over a few weeks. But yeah, so that should be about one duration.
Okay. Now, with $2,000, I don't know about you, but that's pretty expensive, right? So just have out of pocket for, so that's okay, because that's what we have payment through either Medicare or through commercial insurance. So I know you don't know this offhand, but what you would want to do is you would want to find out what that payment code is. So for that particular drug that's already on the market, what's the code? And there are specific payment codes that are associated with various drugs and devices. So you would want to find that out. And then what you would want to do is you will want to talk to Medicare. You want to say, hey, I have a product just like this that's already coded. I'm requesting to receive the same code. Or if you have a case for a new code, then you go to them and say, I'm doing something different. I want a new payment code, and this is the amount that I want. Does that make sense?
Right, yes.
Okay, great. Because you have to, and the reason why we jumped all the way down, like first we said, okay, is this a device, is it a drug? Yes. What does it do? Okay, now you have to figure out payment, because $2,000 is very expensive, right? And so you want people to have access to your drug. You've worked so hard to bring it to market. But then the worst part is that if people can't even afford it, if they can't afford the drug, then your company's not really gonna go anywhere, right? Okay, so then the next part, let's jump back up to 3A. Okay, so now what kind of testing do you need to prove that this drug does what it says it's going to do?
Yeah, probably all of this.
Yeah.
We
So
have, I mean, like we have, you know, we've made it things like this. So we have in vitro data, actually, that we can successfully make it, you know, purify it. We have, you know, cell data that shows that it is cytocompatible. We also have shown some data that it's efficacious. We've had some related, I guess we'll call it, preclinical animal data that shows that it would be, you know, safe and tangentially we'll say effective. So very, very preliminary, but I mean there's still a lot more to do. You know, there's still more synthesis, characterization, cell studies, and then a full, you know, I guess once we get through all of that, then I guess, you know, really well designed animal studies.
yeah, well, I think that's amazing, because you know that there is testing and you know the route that you're going to take. So that's incredibly important, is understanding and mapping that out. It sounds like while a lot of these are in the sort of preliminary standpoints, you understand what you have to do. Great. Okay, so then you jump back down. Now that you understand the testing that you need, I have here this thing called PDAC. It's the pricing department. I'm not sure if they only do devices or not, but you'll have to find, I think they also might do drugs as well. They are the ones that sort of set the pricing for devices. I know that for sure. So once you figure out, okay, we have to do this testing, now we got to figure out what PDAC wants, because again, going back to this pricing, Medicare and FDA, sometimes they want different endpoints. So what a clinical trial looks like for FDA might look very different for CMS. You want to make sure that you're doing them both in parallel so that you don't have to start a whole new study, which is of course incredibly expensive, time consuming. No one wants to do that. So if Medicare needs a specific endpoint, you want to know that now before you start doing all your testing for your clinical trials for the FDA, because if you can easily tack on whatever endpoint CMS needs, that's what you should do. So let's just pretend for the sake of this discussion that you've already done that and you figured out what you need to do, and CMS came back and they asked for another endpoint that you didn't even think of. So now you're going to go ahead and add that, right? Okay, so now let's jump up to 4A. We're almost at the end of this. And thank you so much for being a good sport. So now what you need to do is you have to provide evidence of performance, safety, effectiveness, and quality. So the benefit has to be more than a risk. So let's say, and this is not true, I'm sure, but let's say that your drug, yeah, it cures lead, but it makes you grow an extra ear, right? Now you have another problem on your hands, right? You have this third ear that you're just really not supposed to have and it's sticking out of your forehead, right? That's a problem. Or like more realistically, maybe it increases your level of fatigue and you're more likely to develop certain cancers, right? Like that's a big problem, right? So whatever it is that you have that is benefiting, it must outweigh the risk. So let's pretend that you've done a benefit risk analysis and you said, well, yeah, there are some side effects, you know, dizziness and loss of appetite when you take this course. However, it dissipates, you know, and we know that because of what happened in 3A, because of our testing, we found that those symptoms leave after a month after you use this. So, you know, you don't have this lead poisoning. Yeah, you had some dizziness and loss of appetite, but it left you after a month and you're better off in the long term. Great. So now let's pop down to 4B. This is the part that's really important for payment. Is this necessary? Like, is this medically necessary? And is there a value? Remember back to that quote that we saw with CMS, is that they have to have some sort of value at a low cost. They don't want to, so if you said this drug is going to cost you $50,000, that might be a bit extreme, right? So you want to validate and let them know, like, hey, there is value. Why? Well, maybe it's that people who have lead poisoning, they have comorbidities that they develop that they otherwise would not. And now they have to spend, you have to spend even more money with them on their health care because they're sicker than they would have been had they just taken the $2,000 drug that I have, right? So you want to think about those processes. And then the last bit is going to market. So I kind of talked through some of the later points because you may or may not have gotten to those points yet. I know you've done a tremendous amount of work, but you might not be in that space. Are there any sort of within, I think, 3A all the way to 4B that you have thought of or have evidence for that you want some questions or guidance on?
Not sure. I think, there has been some work because there is a current, like I said, treatment. It's just not it's not ideal, right? So we do have some idea of like safety and quality / benefit risk. The benefits, I guess I could say, of treating for lead poison, low level, including lead poisoning, is increased like cognitive development, decreased behavioral disorders, things along those lines, and those are quantifiable. There are tests for that. There's also risks associated with current treatment. They include, they tried actually a clinical trial looking at the current treatment at lower levels. That's not ideal. There's some GI discomfort, I think a little bit of nausea, also reduced linear growth. They noticed a non-significant, but it did stand out to some researchers where there's increased associations, increase, I should say, incidence of like traumatic events, but again, non-statistically significant, and they seem to have no relationship. It would be like, kind of almost like, like just random kind of by chance traumas, but again, it's significantly higher in treatment group. I think it's a reduced linear growth. So those are some of the, I guess, the risks. So there's some understanding there. And I think though that, there's and then on 4B with the necessity, you can show that there's, again, I guess, if assuming that there's the benefit over the risk, because, it's well known and it's been stated by like CDC and NIH that there is no safe level of lead. So I think that there's a pretty good consensus on that right now. So you can say that it's worth it to treat for a very, what used to be like, very, very low, is now recognized as still has significant impacts. And these impacts extend beyond like those, I guess, physiological benefits, as well as there's also been studies to kind of estimate economic impacts as well. So this, does, based on those types of studies, reduce a lot of economic productivity due to loss of like, intelligence, and also like just treatment for these other associated, diseases that manifest down the road.
I think that's phenomenal. You have clearly thought through a lot of your value prop. And I know we're running a little bit low on time, but I think that for everyone on the call, this was a great way to see how Brian, even in his sort of early stages, has been thinking comprehensively about his drug and how it impacts the patient, the payer, and the regulatory body. And so that's a way that you can set yourself up to win. And he can take what he's thinking about and take it to investors, take it to people who are thinking about becoming employees of his company, et cetera. So thank you so much, Brian. I really appreciate it. And I just want to move on quickly, just in the interest of time, and give you all some action items. And I know that Allison's going to make these slides available, so don't worry about writing them down. But really what we want you to do is, if this is an area or field that you think that you're interested in, start looking at identifying your patient demographic. With Brian, it's pediatrics. Work through that decision tree, because it's a really great high-level way to answer some questions. Then you want to start contacting the DICE, which is the Division of Industry and Consumer Education. That's through the FDA, because they're a totally free or hotline that you can call at any time, and they can send you information. I've called several dozen times over these years, and they've been very helpful to help navigate the websites, because they can be a bit daunting. And then finding your existing CMS code, payer code, if it's there, that's incredibly important. So Brian has identified, like, yeah, there is another drug, and they are getting paid for their products, so you want to make sure to do that. And then we also have just some resources available that we won't go through, but these are just FDA and CMS, some resources that you might want to take a look at. The other resource that's just become live this past week is Elora and I are taking some of our information and distilling them into little white papers that we're going to disseminate. So you can go to our website, regs2riches.com, and you can sign up. It's just a quick, like, put your phone, your email, and your name. And then over time, we'll be sending you just free documents, free information to help you along the process if you're interested in this. And I will probably drop the link in the chat, but if you're interested to learn more, definitely sign up. So
also, you could send us topics. For instance, you know, if you are really interested in pediatric product development, what are the initiatives? That gives us an idea of what the need is, and then we could come up with white papers.
Right. So does anyone have any questions for us before we drop off of the...
I have a quick question. I know we are running out of time, but I'm just curious, how long does the FDA approval typically take, if there is a typical range, and how much does it cost?
So it depends on what you're doing. If you're like me with my back brace that I have now, it's a class 1 exempt. So that's just a registration and a fee. Right now, this year, it's like $5,000 per year. If you're doing anything above that, like if you're doing a class 1 or if you're doing like a de novo, I think the FDA, they have to get back to you within 90 days of your submission. Interestingly enough, I don't believe it's the FDA that takes the long time to make this approval. It's you collecting the data. So if you listen to Brian, he said, oh, we have to do all those tests, right, that we had listed, right? That's going to take quite a amount of time and resources. So it's not that it's going to take the FDA forever to review. It's just that it's going to take you probably a long time to collect quality data that you feel confident in submitting to the FDA. And then in terms of cost, I mean, the fees, they do have small business fees for some of these submissions. So like a de novo submission, there's a small business fee. And I think it's like, I think it's like $9,000 or maybe even less than that.
I think it's gone up. It's gone up, but still it's small. I mean, drugs are unless you're doing a high risk drug, it's cheaper. I'm sorry, devices are cheaper. Drugs are much more expensive. User fee could run several $1 million. Brian, don't just pass out listening to that. But you know, the small business, and usually you partner. But I think the point, Courtney, that you made is so valuable. The stumbling block for your drug or your medical product to reach the market is not really the FDA, it's you. And how you do your studies. Are you doing all the studies? Are the studies designed? It's the design of the study. And like I said, it's grounded in science, but it also needs to include those FDA and CMS endpoints. And so by working with them very early on, you agree. You essentially talk about, this is my study design, these are the number of subjects, this is my endpoint, this is how I'm going to assess. So you go into that detail. So if your study is successful, you have that probability of success just goes up. And so if you have engaged with them also, the FDA is already familiar with you, your product, the review, it's easier, it's faster, it's quick, it's logical, right? So I think that is something that is like so spot on, that the timeline is really dependent on the company and not on the agency. And the development cost. Oh, if you're doing studies that are poorly designed, doesn't meet FDA criteria, there are many examples where they've gone to the FDA and the FDA sent them back asking them to redo studies. Disaster. That adds to the cost. So if you want to streamline it, you want to expedite it, meet with them, discuss with them, align with them before you go ahead.
Yeah. Any other questions, comments, concerns? Did you learn anything? Are you ready for lunch? Okay. All right. Well, it's 1:35 now, so I think I will just turn it over to Allison if you want to wrap up, but that's about it.
All right. Thank you. This was great, Elora and Courtney. And thanks everyone for coming.